Never make the mistake of chasing after a woman. Now, why should you never chase after a woman? What does chasing after mean? Chasing after means approaching a woman who has caught your interest, but not just that. Chasing after, in this context, implies demonstrating an active and targeted interest in capturing someone's attention and interest, especially in the early stages of flirting or a relationship. This involves complimenting the person, initiating more conversations, frequently sending messages, and showing a willingness to get to know them better. Chasing after is not just about investing, it's about revealing your intentions and desires to others, reflecting a proactive attitude in pursuing what you want. This approach is associated with positive masculine energy, where someone seeks to fulfill their desires with determination, as opposed to a passive stance that might indicate a lack of self-confidence. Therefore, the act of chasing after goes beyond mere investment, it is an energetic pursuit of one's desires. Perseverance, on the other hand, is when you persist even after receiving an initial rejection from a woman. For instance, if you are interested in a woman and she expresses that she only wants to be friends and has no romantic interest, or if you initiate a conversation with her through messages and she repeatedly ignores your messages, these indicate her lack of interest. When you send a question on WhatsApp and she doesn't respond, or if she leaves your messages unanswered repeatedly, these are forms of rejection. The same goes when you make a direct invitation, such as suggesting going out together, and she politely declines, saying she's not interested or is busy. It's important to understand that these responses and signals indicate that she is not interested in advancing to a romantic relationship. Respecting these signals and boundaries is essential for maintaining a respectful and healthy interaction. If she mentions being busy this week or something similar, it's okay, people have their commitments, and it's important to take that into consideration. In this situation, what you can do is shift the investment to her, indicating that the next move is up to her. For example, you can say something like, "I understand, no problem. If you ever have more free time and want to make plans, just let me know. I think it would be great for us to meet up. I'll be waiting for your message." This way, you're making it clear that the decision to move forward or not is up to her. This avoids the feeling of you chasing after her, giving her space to express interest if she wants. Remember, it's essential to maintain a respectful approach and show understanding regarding her response. You've understood the concept when a woman clearly gives you a negative response, but you still persist by continuing to pursue her. This also happens when a woman ends a relationship, as it recently happened to me when I received a message on Instagram. Let me read the passage so you can better understand. "I've already tried convincing her that we could have a good relationship together, but she seems undecided, sometimes showing interest, sometimes not. What should I do?" This situation involves a woman who has given a negative response. She made it clear that she doesn't want to be with this man. However, he continues to press, trying to persuade her. He's ignoring her initial refusal, regardless of the reasons she gave, such as it not being the right time or her still being interested in someone else. He's persisting even after receiving a negative response, and that's what we call chasing after. Another example is when a woman indicates that she sees you only as a friend, but you continue to try to advance romantically. Now, what's the core issue here, and why should you never act this way? The answer lies in understanding that every time you face a rejection from a woman, the biggest mistake is giving in to one of these four impulses. In fact, many times you don't even truly want to continue, but you're driven by the desire to satisfy that impulse. The first mistake is when you try to persuade the woman. This involves using logical arguments to convince her to change her mind. You approach her and say something like, "I believe we would have an amazing relationship together. We have many things in common, and I think we could overcome the problems you mentioned." In this case, you're trying to win her over through logic. However, many times, the reason she's not interested is not logical but emotional. Trying to address her with logical arguments to overcome something fundamentally emotional often leads to exhaustion. Additionally, by doing this, you put yourself in an unfavorable position, damaging your image in her eyes. Another approach that's equally problematic is when you try to overly please the woman or mold yourself to her. Essentially, you take on the role of a prince charming or savior, especially when she shares fears stemming from past experiences. This is something many women mention, right? In these situations, the idea may arise that you need to demonstrate that you're different from the other men she's encountered. So, you go to great lengths to please her in every possible way. On the other hand, if you were in a relationship and she decides to end it, you make excessive efforts to understand every detail of the relationship, believing this will make her reconsider. However, this approach isn't appropriate. If you always treated her with respect, provided balanced attention, and showed consideration, but she still chose to end the relationship, that's an indication of your value and self-respect. If, by any chance, you were unfaithful or made mistakes, the situation is different. However, if the breakup occurred even when you treated her well, and she mentioned needing time for reflection, trying to overly please her is actually the worst path to take. This can lead to an unfavorable dynamic and isn't healthy for both parties involved. Another common reaction from many men when faced with rejection or distancing from a woman is to invest even more. This translates into actions like giving gifts or flowers and, in some cases, idealizing this woman excessively, placing her on a pedestal that doesn't correspond to an equal relationship. This behavior shares similarities with the attempt to please, but with an additional element: now you're directing more resources, like time and effort, into the situation. In this scenario, the idea is that by making additional investments, you'll be able to capture her interest. However, this approach isn't always healthy or productive. It can create an imbalance in the dynamic between you, leading to a relationship where you're constantly trying to impress her while she maintains a more passive stance. This can harm the building of a genuine and balanced relationship. Therefore, excessively investing after a rejection isn't an effective strategy and can actually distance you even more. Furthermore, the fourth reaction that many men have is becoming even more obsessed with the woman, often fueled by the concept of challenge. Now, the reason all these approaches I mentioned are problematic boils down to the fact that they yield undesirable results. If you're curious to understand what goes on in a woman's mind when you chase her after receiving a rejection, then go ahead and like this, because I'm going to explain it right now. Let's go. With the like given, I'll explain to you the logic behind this. Every time a man, that's you, keeps pressuring, insisting, or trying to please, a pattern emerges. Each time you engage in one of these actions, the woman unconsciously starts seeing you as less masculine. This less masculinity doesn't refer to something superficial, but rather the decrease in the erotic, romantic aspect of the relationship between a man and a woman. Instead, she begins to perceive you more as a friend or brother, a more fraternal man. It's important to understand that often her desire is rooted in the hope that you'll value yourself more, that you won't be naive or foolish. Deep down, she desires a strong stance from you, rather than seeing you molding yourself to her wishes or persistently submitting. Therefore, it's crucial to adopt an attitude that demonstrates self-worth and self-respect, rather than placing yourself in a position of begging and submission. If by any chance, she even holds a minimum of interest or sentiment for you, it's like she's secretly begging you to recognize and value yourself. However, if you keep pursuing her relentlessly, there will come a point where she won't even want to see you, no matter how persistent you are. This happens because there's a limit to how low she can perceive your value. She'll only maintain a certain level of attraction and sentiment for you. If you fall into patterns of very low self-valuation by chasing too much, this can become irreversible. Now, you may have heard of the tactic of going silent so she comes after you. This strategy sometimes works, but it's important to understand some details. Although she might initially react to this distance, the chances are high that she'll realize it's just a maneuver. This is because your past actions and your current posture might not align. There will be times when you might display vulnerability, or you might give in and not maintain the necessary firmness. If the reason for distancing isn't a genuine decision but a bluff, she'll likely identify it, rendering the strategy ineffective. There's an interesting reflection about the word decide. It's said to have its origin related to the word dissension, which is a kind of conflict or disagreement. To decide, in this context, is like eliminating other possibilities, it's like killing alternatives. So, when you make a resolute decision, you're closing off a part of your past, of what you no longer wish to experience. This is why true decisions, which go beyond mere desires, are so powerful. They open doors and move the world. Now, I ask a question: how many times have you chased after a woman, and it genuinely increased her interest in you? How many times, after she gave you a negative response, did your effort to chase her bring a real increase in her interest in you? I'm sure the answer is few or none. So, why would you keep repeating this same approach? Now, let's look at the practical decisions you need to make. Decide not to stay in the friend zone. Avoid the mistake of trying to please a woman to force her to change her mind. Also, decide to stop investing your time in a woman who doesn't show reciprocity, because a woman who isn't reciprocal is, in fact, the wrong woman for you. Above all, decide to prioritize your self-love over the fleeting impulse of wanting to be with a specific woman. Embrace these decisions definitively. Feel the freedom these choices bring. And, from this point, take the necessary actions, like stepping back, blocking numbers, unfollowing, or any other measures you deem appropriate. Remember that you're a capable adult who knows well what needs to be done. Now, share with me how important these decisions have been for you. Leave your comments below.